Hi, welcome to another episode of Quarto. Today is a very, very special episode for me. We have here Peter Lonergan. For those who don't know who is he, is maybe one of the biggest youth coaches in Australia. I'll try to explain it. But for me, especially, has been someone that I can count on online in terms of clinics, articles, even YouTube channel, YouTube videos, or because Australian basketball shares a lot of things, and I'm really glad of it. Since I became, I was saying to coach enough, since I was beginning my career as a coach, as a youth coach, when I need something and I'll try to look something up, Peter Lonergan pops up every time. So I've been stealing a lot of things like a good coach does it, and I'm very welcome to have you here today. So, Coach, first of all, thanks for being here and share a little bit more of your experience and of your thoughts on basketball. In this case, on teaching defensive principles through small-sided games. And if you want to start, if you have something to say to who's hearing us about what's the most important thing we can get through this experience of a podcast, of listening and sharing and exchanging opinions, ideas, thoughts, anything you want to start with, we can start from here.
Well, thanks, Coach, and it's great to spend some time with you. I've admired your work, and as we were talking about off air, I really enjoy people that want to share the game. We have a saying here: "Learn it one day, teach it the next," or "Learn it one day, share it the next," and that's what you do. So it's certainly fun, and hopefully we can talk some hoops, maybe have the odd argument,
Mm-hmm.
difference of opinion, and then we'll come back in alignment, and the coaches will get something out of it. The first things with your small-sided games around defense, and I know we'll go through some pillars that we've agreed on.
Mm-hmm.
For me, the key elements of a successful small-sided game, one's clarity of purpose. Do the players know why we're doing certain things? I think sometimes we just jump into small-sided games. We know as coaches what we want to achieve, but maybe the players don't have clarity of purpose. I think there needs to be an element of contact or physicality in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to include realistic advantage, disadvantage. And the big one for me is, does it look like what happens in a game?
Okay.
I see too many defensive drills, too many small-sided games that don't really replicate or expose the players to actually what happens in a game a lot. So that's where I start. I don't know what you think, or if you've got anything to add to that as we get into this.
No, the clarity of purpose for me is one of the biggest things, because I do believe that sometimes as coaches we try to, because we are on this new way of self-discovering and purposely discovering. So if we have kids that are starting to understand the game, or they are in the beginning of their youth process, maybe not telling them what they are doing keeps them away from really getting a good feel and a good repetition from the small side game that we're trying. So I'm really being big into the clarity of purpose. About the contact and physicality, I do have a question. Is that when we play, because I'm really on this dilemma now about on air drills on and small sided games, but and how to put them together, because I do believe that sometimes not having a lot of stimulus outside of my own body and my ball and my hand can be good also. Can we, with on-air drills, see defense or offense, just a random opinion, can we put some cognitive stimulus for them to for the drill become not so on air? Let's put it this way.
Yeah, and I think so. I think people get confused that everything has to be game-like, everything has to be a small-sided game, and that any drills that are on air, are bad, and that's not true. So, you know, we have a methodology. We talk about teach it, drill it, play it, and we try and apply that to everything we do. So teach it, provide the detail, make sure the players have clarity of purpose and whatever. Then let them rehearse it, and that often is on zero. So then you can make those corrections and whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
Then you may play it with some constraints, right? Advantage, disadvantage, shot clock, dribble, and then you play it live. So teach it, drill it, play it, move to the next thing. And I think sometimes that the detail does get lost when we're in such a hurry to get to the small-sided game.
Mm-hmm.
So, the challenge for all of us, particularly youth coaches, is to strike that balance. We know that we want to play a little bit more. We know we want to do things more often that look like what happens in a game. It doesn't have to be at the expense of detail and fundamental learning and those things. So, if you put a filter on all your drills, did you
Mm-hmm.
teach it efficiently? Did you expose the movement and the concept in the drill, and that might be on zero or advantage, and then did you play it?
Mm-hmm.
And then we're on to the next thing.
No, that's. I think I've heard it one time because I do talk about this type of stuff a lot with Paul Kelleher, that
Yeah.
of Ireland. That this online community has a lot of things that are great. One of those is we can talk with everyone from all over the world, and he was telling me one time that we do have this now this urge of everything has to be 3-on-3, 2-on-2, 2-on-1 plus one, because it's funnier to play, it's cooler to do, it's cooler to think about. And sometimes or my experience tells me that sometimes, like you said, you have to teach it on zero or against five walking or against three walking. Just give him a different perspective of, okay, this is the drill, this is our details, this is our way of doing, and then we can play it, not just throw it to the sea, like we say. um but I do have a similar question regarding this that is way off topic. That
Yep.
I was thinking earlier today when I was walking to work, that a lot of coaches or youth coaches that are getting into this type of job, this type of profession, have a hard time trying to understand the small side game mentality, the more ecological, transformational way of coaching, giving more to the players than take, because a lot of them were coached, unfortunately, by coaches that were way old school than they should be. How can one coach that is getting into, because I had the same problem, and I had to study a lot and watch a lot and ask a lot, how can one coach can get out of that bubble, let's say, put it this way, that bubble more easily, in terms of getting into this small side game business, getting into the more player centered way of coaching?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is be patient. Don't be in a hurry. And
Mm-hmm.
and coaching's a work in progress. If you look at some of the best coaches in the world, whether it's Coach Pesic, Obradovic, Greg Popovich. In our country, the best coach we have is Brian Gorge, and he's 70 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they're still trying to find out how they can do it. So, firstly, patience, and don't be too hard on yourself. We speak a lot about putting the WMI filter across everything we do, and that stands for what's most important, right? So, try and identify what's most important to you as a coach, what's most important to you in the setting that you're at. So you've got a youth team, or you've got a cadets team, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
age group is. What's most important to you? What's most important for their time of development? And then it's really trial and error. Just do it more often,
Mm-hmm.
and then just do. And I'm sure that you've either spoken to, or you've been exposed to Alan Keane from Great Britain, another great sharer. He talks about the hot review. So after practice, straight away, just write some dot points. Okay, how well did we do? Did that function well? Did that that worked, great. No, that didn't work. All right, well, if it didn't work, maybe don't revisit it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the last
So,
thing I would say, and even getting ready for this, I've got 22 bullet points down on my pad here to the left of me, so I can have clarity in what I want to discuss
mm-hmm.
with you. And I think just spending time in thought and just writing some dot points down, bullet points down is important. I think what we do know now is if we've got to fall one way or the other, fall towards playing.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that we come out, roll the balls out, and it's all playing. But if it's a scale, we want to fall towards, again, what happens in a game,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to impact winning. So
And you said one thing there, coach, that I'm really intrigued about. That is, I was talking about a university professor that teaches sports teaching and coaching, and has a lot of doing with this variability, a lot more centered in football. And he was telling me one time that even if you try something out in a practice for the first time and it doesn't goes well, it doesn't mean it's a bad drill or a bad concept. It means that your players are needs a little bit more of time to get used to the concept. Or and you were saying the bullets point, the hot reviews we do, this is work, this did this work out, did it didn't work out, why? Are you a fan of, if it doesn't go well for the first time, you try to understand a different way of doing, or you retry it the next day, the next week, the next month, whenever you feel it?
yeah, I think one of the most important words in coaching is YET, yet. It didn't work well yet,
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because and then you revisit it. And in that hot review, when you're having a discussion with your assistant or even the players, what you think, you know, uh, and once someone may say, "Oh, I think it didn't work just because of this," and it might be one minor point. It might be the context around it, or it might be the training grid. We just didn't have enough space for it to feel like a game,
Mm-hmm.
right? So again, use that word a lot. That didn't work yet, but we're going to revisit it. And that also keeps practice really varied. That you're not continually throwing things out,
You're
right?
revisiting
Because
some of it. Yeah.
you just got to revisit it, and that freshens up the players mentally. So, or you know, the best way to impact a drill is just add one element. So it didn't work. Okay, well, let's put a 6-second shot clock on it. All right. Or it didn't work. Let's take one defender out. Right. So there's more
Mm-hmm.
advantage. Or it didn't work. Let's add a defender. So there's less advantage. Right. Let's tilt the training grid. So there's less space. Let's tilt it so there's more space. So usually if you add one element, it'll fix it'll fix the
Mm-hmm.
drill.
Yeah, it's funny you were talking about this type of the training elements, because I carried with me all times. I think I have it here already. I carry with me I call it my Bible, the constraints led approach. I call
Yep.
it my Bible, and people make fun of me because I read it like 3 or 4 times, and I do really am big on what you say. Like, if it doesn't result, add one element, take one element out, change the element, and in those 4 or 5 things, you can pretty much do everything you want with everything you need. But not getting out. Let's come back to our main subject. That is the how can we teach um, through this type of drills and mindset. We were talking about small sided games. How can we teach the defensive principles? Because let's be honest, when I was a player, when I heard my coach saying, now let's practice defense, I was saying, damn, this is not that much fun, because we associate as a kid fun to make baskets, assists, the flashy assists. We don't. And then I learned when I was a little bit older that taking a charge is a lot more fun than dunk, if I can dunk.
Yeah.
um, Making them do a 24 seconds violation can be fun. if we go together. So my first, to really get into it, in this conversation, my first hard question for you is, how can we make defense more fun?
Well, I think the first thing that you do is you never describe a drill as a defensive drill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because to your point, when you're a young player, as soon as you hear that, it's like when you're a kid growing up and you ask your mum what you're having for the evening meal, and she says broccoli, beans, cauliflower. You know, so you got a bad attitude to that meal already,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so we got to talk about breakdowns, small-sided games, two-way teaching, whatever. But I'd stay away in giving it a tattoo. This is a defensive drill. There's got to be an element of competition in it,
Mm-hmm.
and every player, doesn't matter what the age, they enjoy
Compare.
competition.
Sí, sí.
And then, again, it doesn't have to be small-sided games, but one thing I think we underestimate, it's got to make sense. It's got to make sense, and especially, the modern player, these are kids. We're dealing with kids now that are, born in 2012, that are coming into our
Mm-hmm.
environment now, right? I was born in 1969, so it's not even the same universe. So now they expect it to make sense and they want somewhat of an instant gratification. They're not going to spend hours on the shell drill
Uh-huh.
because there's a certain element, and I love the shell drill, so I'm not criticizing it, but to them, how does this equate to the game? And then I think the big thing is, even at the youth level, what impacts winning? What really impacts winning? And I wrote that down. I said, so ball pressure, containment, jumping to the ball, shot contest, and box out.
Mm-hmm.
That's what impacts winning. So in my small-sided games, my drills, whatever, I'm going to make sure that I've got a touch point on ball pressure, containment, jumping to the ball, shot contest, and box out. And then we just flesh it around that. I think you as a coach need to have clarity. I spend a lot of time writing dot points, or some people call them bullet points, but even communicating in dot points.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just more clarity. It's less of me. It's more about, we want to achieve this, this, and this. All right, and then the players will latch onto that
Uh-huh.
and they'll be compliant. It's when they don't understand the why, especially if it's defense. It's just like eating a big plate of broccoli. It's just not very enjoyable.
Yeah. So if you're saying that if you add some competition and you add the two-way teaching mode of either defense and offense, so adding in some transition, some more variability to the game, and then emphasizing that we are doing this because we need to get better A, B, C, and D. For them, it's easier to understand and easier to buy into that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I think sometimes that we just expect them to understand.
Mm-hmm.
What youth coaches have got to realize is they're not mini coaches. You're
Mm-hmm.
not coaching mini coaches. Their brain doesn't operate the same way yours does, right? So just make sure that there's that clarity. Our national head coach, Coach Gorgian, has a great saying: "Clarity is the new clever." Right? So don't try and be the smartest coach in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Try and be the coach that provides players with the most clarity so they know exactly the why and what we're doing. And that's another great little filter to put
Uh-huh.
on there. Clarity is the new clever. Don't try and be clever, try and be clear, and you'll get better results.
Yeah, like we say too. I used to say to all my players that I don't need them to be attentive. I need them to be ready in terms of just getting into this of clarity and cleverly. I'm saying this on a level of, I know that you know this, but I need you to be ready to do the things that you know about. So it's more,
Yeah.
it's in the same route. So let's dive into this type of stuff that we were talking about in defense. The first pillar I want to talk to you, coach, is closeouts and on-ball defense, because nowadays I do believe that because we do a lot of rotations, X rotations, stunt drives, next defense,
Mm.
in all this stuff, almost every possession have a closeout to defend, either a short
Yep.
closeout or a long closeout. So when we are incorporating the small side games into the closeouts, for you, or what are the main important things that should integrate every drill or every small side game that you put into the closeout? Because you were talking before about box out, and all, I think that box out has a whole new world of himself, because it's a very difficult thing to teach, in my opinion, because it has a lot to do with the perception of the player, not so from technique or strength. Is more about positioning, and then understand that the player can go A, B, or C, and they have to be ready to attack those positions. So but we will get to that later. So when we are starting to incorporate closeout defense, because I saw clinic that you put out on YouTube a couple months ago, that you were talking about this type of stuff, closeout, the driver, the shooter, although the new world of closeouts. Walk us through your mind into closeout defense, and also on ball defense after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to me, that's the the key pillar of your defense. Can you close out, and can you defend the first bounce with square hips? That's what we speak a lot about that. I think closeouts is something that's been um, over drilled and under taught for a long time. The concept of
Mm-hmm.
2/3, 1/3, choppy steps, and whatever. And when you're introducing players to it, yep, that's sound. But in what game have you ever seen of any value where a player has choppy steps?
Yeah.
So we talk about the ability to accelerate and decelerate. So can you move quickly, and then can you slow your momentum, right? So you can
Uh-huh.
contain. What are we doing with your hands? We know now that the 3-point shot's such a significant weapon. So, we're going to defend shot first, and then our focus is, can we defend it? Can we catch the first bounce with square hips? Secondly, realistic closeouts. Now, again, if it's on zero and we're working technique, I can stand 2 meters from you, throw the ball to you, and close out. But that's a very unrealistic closeout,
Mm-hmm.
right? So have some movement before the movement. So get the
Okay.
player to have to change stance, change position, then close out, because that's what's going to happen in a game.
Yeah.
And can you start basically every sort of live drill that you do with a closeout? It's the
Okay.
same analogy, and
Mm-hmm.
my friend and colleague from Canada, Mike McKay, talks about hiding the vegetables in the spaghetti sauce. You've probably heard
Yeah.
him say that
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
refer, and that's what you're going to do with closeouts. We talk to our emerging players here and we say, if you can't close out, you can't be on an international floor,
Yeah.
right? That's going to be the difference.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at really good Australian, European, even collegiate players, if they can't close out against really good offensive players, they can't be on an NBA floor,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
It's so important. So to to summarize that, I would just make sure there's movement before the movement, so it's realistic. So they've got to change the stance, they've got to change position, then they've got to close out. Talk about acceleration into deceleration rather than 2/3, 1/3, choppy steps, whatever else. You've got to constantly coach the hands.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a bit of an old school. I'm two-hand closeouts, and I like that, because I think you're more likely to keep square hips with two hands up than one hand up. Some people are inside hands, some are shot, but whatever you want to do is fine. But constantly coach and define what you want with the hands, and then I think where we fall down is we teach and drill the closeout in isolation. So I close out,
And
drill's
it's
over,
done. Uh-huh.
right? Well, we know that modern offense is all about attacking the closeout, right? So, at minimum, get the offense to take one bounce at minimum, and then we can talk about your ability to move your feet so you can catch the first bounce with square hips.
Coach,
Really
sorry
important.
to interrupt you. When you say square hips, you're saying that when he does the first bounce, you have to be in front of the ball, or you can be just
Yeah.
you can't be running side by side. You have to be square.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Because what
Yep.
I feel is that sometimes when the closeout is the extra out rotation is more of a diagonal instead of a straightforward path, that if I know that I'm a little bit late, I try to push them aside. So I try to push them, I don't know, baseline, because that our X
Yep.
rotation is coached that way. So I, instead of doing a closeout and get the first bounce, I already make him go and I anticipate the second bounce then. So I want to understand your opinion on that, because I do say to my players, if you are late, don't try to get the square hips, because they will call a foul because they will attack the hip.
Yep.
So just to get your opinion on that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. And basketball's not a game of absolutes. The two worst words you can use in coaching are always and never.
Okay. Yeah.
Always do this, never do this. It's not realistic. The game lives in between those two words. It lives in between always and never. We spend a lot of time about trying to get them to catch that first bounce for square hips, knowing that come a game setting, so into your small-sided games, 3-on-3, whatever else, you're going to have to do that nuance. Okay, I haven't got there. The closeout was an angle. I'm caught on the high side. I've got to make sure that I influence to our push points or the area of the floor that you want, baseline, short corner, middle, whatever it may be. But I think aspirationally, we want to be so good that we can catch even that with square hips, knowing that, you know, as you add numbers. So 1-on-1, I wouldn't give him an out.
Okay.
You
Yeah,
know,
because
I
it's one on one. It's the only solution they have is to go there. Yeah,
yeah,
I was talking when you had like a very common drill is a 3v1 that turns into a 2v2. So who
yeah,
drives, passes, and becomes the second X out. So the first one has two options, and it's normal. It's human biology that I can anticipate that much the first pass. So I have to be ready, and sometimes I will arrive late on those type of situations. You can give that gap to the players to, okay, if you are late to the first bounce, unless you have to, and you have to get to the second bounce no matter what.
yeah, yeah. And it's more about, and it's a great point. It's more about getting to a position of square hips rather
Uh-huh.
than first, second bounce.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So 1-on-0, we'd be pretty. 1-on-0, just technique. There's no, we're not
No way
having a
out.
discussion.
Yeah.
You're going to practice square hips. 1-on-1 with constraints, we're going to set it up so it's going to be like a straight line closeout. And again, there's no excuse. You just got to move your feet. Then tilt, so make an angle. So now it's probably a bit more game like. We getting to that square hip environment on one bounce is going to be difficult, right? So now we got push points, and then once it gets to 3-on-3, or you said the combination 2-on-2, whatever, it's less about the teaching detail.
Mm-hmm.
The teaching detail. Remember we spoke about teach it, drill it, play it. Once you get to the play it, that's exactly what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you need, because the reason that we use small-sided games and constraints, led learning and all that stuff, is for them to be solution seekers.
Yeah.
We don't want to be solution providers all the time as coaches. We want the players to be solution seekers. So can they figure it out? But and the other thing with closeouts, can you create drills, small-sided games? I love Paul Kelleher's term games of purpose.
Uh-huh.
Just makes so much sense to me. Can you get a second closeout in? Not a second closeout for the same person. We talk about here with our national teams, as a team defense, if you can win the first two closeouts of a possession, you're going to win that possession,
Oh, that's really
right?
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
So there's a kick ahead, for example. Someone has to fly closeout. If we can get to square hips and contain that, make them shift it. Maybe then there's a drive or a drag screen and another. If we can win the first two closeouts, possession's over, right?
Yeah, because we take the momentum out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think the first thing I wrote, when you spoke about, okay, small sided games for D, I put my WMI filter on. What's most important? Closeouts. um, it's the hardest skill,
Yeah.
defensive skill to do in the game. Um, and then your containment, again, depending on what I'm not here to say I'll teach it this way, this is the best way, whatever else. Make sure there's clarity with your group. They know, what your push points are, what your
hmm
areas of influence are, what your hand positioning is. Yeah, that's a big one, and you've got to constantly coach the hands. I think youth coaches don't spend enough time coaching feet or hands.
I do think that youth coaches, and I put myself in that, but I'm very critical of my work, and I try to understand that and be better. I do think that we are, because our lives are not that detail oriented for the most part, because we are trying to do everything at every time at the same
Yep.
time. As coaches, we say that we are detail oriented, but on the macro space, not in the micro space. On the micro space, we are zero or almost zero detail oriented. So yeah, you were talking about that, and I was thinking in my head, yeah, yesterday I had a practice about one-on-one or position. I wasn't talking about the feet and the hands for that long, that long. So I do believe that on that type of skills, old school coaches and coaches from the other generations had a lot of upside in terms of detail oriented coaching as much as us. um, and I do believe that, like you said, if we teach the feet and the hands, we are way closer to get a perfect closeout, a perfect positioning, perfect everything, a perfect or a very good perfect everything. But you were talking before of designing the drill, or how can we? And I was about to ask you that. Can you walk us through a typical small side game that you like to use, that the coaches that are listening or seeing on YouTube can try to imagine and try to put it together for their teams?
Yeah, I think the great way to start is what do you see the most of? So in your league, in your different competition, is it a lot of dribble drive? Is it a lot of 5 out? Spacing, drive and kick.
Mm-hmm.
Is it a lot of pick and roll? Is it a lot of dribble handoff or stationary handoff? Gets whatever you want to call it. There's less and less post play, but I'm here in Brisbane, Australia, and we're at the under-18 national championship. There's a 7-4 kid here, so they throw it in. He's 16. They
Mm-hmm.
throw it into him. So okay, how do we gut that? So firstly, identify what's the most common action or actions in your league. What do you see every day? What do you
Mm-hmm.
see every game? Then work back from that. Okay. So we need, say it's drive and kick, or we call it split kick extra. All right. Okay. So we need to design some drills that expose our kids to guarding split kick extra. Right. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it on zero, so they get the rhythm and the movement from it. This is how we're going to do it from advantage, disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
and this is how we're going to play it. All right. And don't think drill. I think sometimes as soon as we get to that word, we close our focus.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So just think play as much as you can. And that's a big one that we do. So right now, in Australia, the dribble handoff it's like plague proportions,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So if I'm coaching a youth team, I'm spending a disproportionate amount of time on how we can blow up the dribble handoff,
Yeah.
how we can impact it, whatever else, because I know I'm going to see 40 of them the next game,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not sure how many practices a week your practices you would have, but in Australia, most teams would only train twice per week.
Oh,
Yeah, in because what'll happen, the kids will play in multiple teams,
oh, okay, 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 okay.
right? So you'll only have that core group of players maybe 3 hours a week, 2 times 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be efficient. So
Yeah,
I'm not going to practice a lot of stuff that I don't see in games. So
yeah, yeah.
I think that's a great starting point. Allows you to be efficient, but again, clarity of purpose, element of contact, realistic advantages, and does it look what happens in a game?
And with
They're, they're,
those four bullet points, you can design
yeah,
whatever you want. Yeah, yeah. No, that's
yeah,
perfect. And because you are talking about advantages and disadvantages, I wanted to talk a little bit also about constraints, because you do on that clinic that really sets my mind off to talk to you, because I really love the clinic that you, or the talk that you gave, or the practice that you gave. And you talked about never constrain dribbles, constrain time, or constrain points or whatever. And I really, it got me thinking, because it's very true what you said. Because if you constrain dribbles, after four dribbles, maybe at the fifth dribble he would score alone, and we are neglecting our players to, okay, he did four dribbles, I can finish my job. Walk us through a little bit of your opinion on how can we use constraints, mainly on defense. How can we use constraints to be more effective and more efficient on the drills that we gave to players?
yeah. I think the first thing when we talk about constraints, what we don't want to constrain or limit is creativity.
Okay.
And I'll credit my good friend and colleague Damien Cotter, who's an assistant coach with the Chicago Bulls. He was the first one to really explain to me the value of using time as a constraint. 4 second shot clock, 6 second shot clock, 8 second shot clock, right? In player development, because, like, for example, the players are so good now at driving when they're cut off by square hit is spinning. Well, if I say you've only got two dribbles, you're never going to be able to execute a spin move.
Yeah, yeah,
Yet the spin move at the end of penetration is hard. If I say you've only got two dribbles, the move now where the spin into the pull up jump shot is a really effective move. It's a good shot. But because I'm trying to, be a drill sergeant, the kid might need three or four dribbles. Now, you don't want it to look like a video game, you know.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
But if you just put realistic shot clocks on, and the other thing with that is don't don't count it. When I say put a shot clock, 4 seconds, six
Okay.
seconds, it's for the players to have an internal shot clock.
So you say don't shout it or don't tell it out loud every time you do a rep, the shot clock, or is in their head, they have to have a idea of the time? How do you manage that?
Yeah,
Because after a little bit, of course the kids will say, no coach, that was 5 seconds or 7 seconds. Or how do you
yeah,
manage that with them also?
yeah. Well, it's a guide. It's not a rule, right?
Okay,
So early on, if I had, say, 12-year-olds, I might help them with a count,
okay, okay,
right?
okay. Mm-hmm.
I might help them for a while, right? And I might be a bit generous. So we say it's a one-on-one drill off a closeout or something like that. You got a 4 second shot clock. And 4 seconds doesn't sound like long, but it's a long time in one-on-one.
Yeah,
Long time, right?
with a lot of space also.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. 2-on-2, you're 6 to 7, 3-on-3, yeah, 8 to 10. So
yeah,
that's a rule of thumb, right?
yeah.
Um, and if they take 5 seconds, I'm never going to let them know. And if I see that there's merit in what they're doing and there's a purpose in there's a plan, I'm not going to go, no, boop, turn over, because that just, that's not a constraint. That's a
Mm-hmm.
restraint,
Yeah, yeah,
So, because you never want to do anything that impacts creativity.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of small-sided games and constraint-based teaching and learning. You're actually trying to foster creativity. So make sure that, and as I said, I've got to credit Coach Cotter, We've borrowed that from him, and we use it now in all. We have very few drills that don't include some sort of time constraint, because the other thing is our game is more about time than any other game on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
3 seconds in the key, 5 seconds to get the ball in bounds, 14 seconds in the front court, 8 seconds in the back court, 24 seconds. You think about the time components.
Mm-hmm.
Well, why aren't we teaching time components to young players? So, yeah, that's been a bit of a game changer for how we do our player development, to be honest, in the last 3 or 4 years.
No, it's interesting because, like you said, the game is going every 10 years is going down on the shot clock. So everything is on 14 or less seconds. Even 24-second plays, the schemes are to attack in the first 8, first 14, first 20. So it's amazing how we can correlate all the stuff that we're talking. But going beyond the closeouts and the one-on-one defense, like you say, when it comes to 2-on-2, 3-on-3, even 4-on-4 or 5-on-5, the positioning takes a big place on how can we do the things, even closeout or steal the ball or inter rotation. Like positioning for me, after a closeout or before closeout, I don't I'm still too, I yet have to understand that in my head. But positioning is a big part of my philosophy as a coach in terms of defensing, because I do spend a lot of time positioning players and try them to understand. And we were talking earlier about shell drill, and I love shell drill, and I want to be a little bit how do you say, I don't know what to say in English, take it a little bit under the bus, because I do think that we overuse shell drill in a non-specific way, in a non-efficient way. So we do 4-on-4 shell drill. The ball passes during 40 seconds, and we are there. Boom, 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 bam, bam, bam. I do think that
Yeah.
at some time it becomes inefficient. So I wanted to ask you, and I know the answer for this. The first part: is it good, the shell drill? Can we use it as a on-air drill first, and can we make it, or can we transform it into a small sided game?
The answer is yes to all those things, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll go through each step. The shell drill still, or 4-on-4 defensive positioning, whatever you want to call it, is still the best way to teach, particularly young players, the relationship between ball you basket, ball you man, one
Mm-hmm.
pass away, two passes away, all these things, jumping to the ball, all these things are absolutely crucial to them to be successful. So these coaches say, "Oh, shell drill's so old school." Well, you're doing a disservice to your players. They
Mm-hmm.
need to have an understanding. So, firstly, and I'm a lot older than you, coach, so I'm a bit of a dinosaur. You know, I'm a baby of the shell drill. So, I go watch about 200, 300 practices a year of different, and I get itchy if I don't see shell drill. So that's where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
The issue is we spend too long in in a in the very structured environment. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, really, while repetition is crucial, of course, and rehearsal, I don't think we have to have as much repetition as coaches think. You know, so if you've got an 8 minute window in your a training block of shell, right? Uh, the first 2 minutes, so maybe 4 possessions, a rehearsal, really detailed, almost on air shifts and whatever
Mm-hmm.
else, right? Because it's like brushing your teeth. If I don't brush my teeth for a week, but then I brush my teeth for 20 minutes on Sunday, it doesn't work. My teeth's still going to rot, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I've got to do it 2 minutes a day. Same with shell, right? Don't spend forever here. So 2 minutes, then 2 minutes where there's some more movement. It's more game like. Then 2 minutes where it's advantage, disadvantage, constraints, and then 2 to 3 minutes where it's playing, right? And I think shell covers a lot of areas. So,
Mm-hmm.
say for example, if you've got a lot of middle pick and roll, European basketball, you guys do such a good job of teaching the middle third of the court,
Mm-hmm.
far better than we do. I'm going to make sure that I've got 2 to 3 minutes of defending middle pick and roll in the shell setting, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I think you've got to go on the journey and then move on with it. But I think these coaches that say, "Oh, the shell drill's old school" and whatever else, I've yet to hear a suitable replacement.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing that gets me every time when I because when I was doing my third level of coaching in Portugal, the coach of Benfica, Norberto, that is one of the biggest defensive coaches on the
Mm-hmm.
in Portugal. He said to us every day that we do defense, he said, "Shell resolves all your problems. If you have a dilemma with how can I defend this type of play or this type of situation, put it on Shell. Shell resolves all your problems." And from there, I'll try to incorporate Shell, and I'll try to add movement and add this eventually, like you said, to add a little bit more availability and more small sided game it. Um, but I think that we do end up taking a lot of the balance of don't do not doing the time that we need rehearsal with x passes that we had to be that they have to be open to enter, so we do the hands, the feet, and I do think that if we do a lot of time, players get bored because they don't see anything different, and they don't go, let's go coach, let's do something different. In regarding of this also, when we are talking about small sided games, we talk about constraints, we talk about elements of practice, elements of design, designing. How can we transform, like we're saying, the shell drill into a very complete small sided game? What has been like your experience with shell that you can it can be transformed into a small sided game?
The first way to do it is started in a 3/4 court, right? Um, so you've got two guards in the back court, you've got two wings at half court, and they're being defended with appropriate spacing. Take two dribbles, right? Everyone, and we're rehearsing, then we flip it back to the other guard. He takes two
Mm-hmm.
dribbles, everyone moves, it's not live yet, whatever. Um, and then maybe flip it to the coach. Then the coach, as when they skip it, now it's live, it's realistic, and it's got some randomness.
Mm-hmm.
So you're achieving the same thing, but it's just a little more. Players like the game's played in the full court, and players like practicing in the full court. Yet you think about your drills, often, 2/3 of our drills are in the half court, right?
Mm-hmm. Or
And
it begins
shell,
at yeah.
right? Shell is always like that. So the first thing I do is 3/4 court, so it looks a bit more like a game. It's still controlled, and then you go. I think you need an element of switch and change and chaos. Switch, change, chaos. So, and when I say switch, I don't mean switching defenses. You might have to switch your role. So we start with shell. I yell switch. The team that's on offense has to put the ball down. You would have seen this drill. It's an old
Mm-hmm.
Bobby Knight drill. You can't guard the guy that was guarding you, so you've got to find and communicate, whatever. Or I yell change.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to put the ball down, then the other team's going the other way. So it doesn't become that eating broccoli. There's a
Yeah.
bit of spice, there's a bit of sauce, because now we get to actually think and communicate and have some fun, um, and then add screening, because screening makes it game like. Whether
Yeah.
that's pick and roll, whether that's down screens, flare screens, away screens, whatever. Add screening, because that'll just add an element of. And we talk about my key elements: clarity of purpose, element of contact. Right? As soon as
Yeah.
you add an element of contact, it looks more like basketball, right? And I think that's a big one. I don't think we screen enough. We being coaches in shell enough, and
Mm-hmm.
then then we get to the game and we're frustrated. Well, again, it's the brushing your teeth
Yeah.
analogy. If you chip away at it every practice, your teeth are going to be wider.
Yeah,
So
and if you think about modern basketball and how is it played, that 90% of the off ball screens we are switching 1 through 4 or 2 3 4. The shell remains the same in terms of resolving the same problem. So if we're doing a flare screen through, I don't know, corner and wing, if I'm well positioning, the ball is on the top, maybe I can remain in my position just with communication, and the one that is getting the screen readjust his position to not get the slip on. Um, but I do think, and I do see that when we add off screening to nowadays game, like 90% of the times we switch, there is the solutions remain all almost the same. So like you say, add more screening, so it's not going to be a great amount of new information for the players. They
yeah,
understand that, they see, oh, so if they do a pin down and I'm here and I'm switching, you can take the guy that is coming up and I stay in my place. Oh, coach, this is easy. So I do believe, like in that, like you said, like add more screen to shell and to drills in general,
yeah,
because the screening is the day-to-day thing on basketball nowadays. Yeah.
yeah. And with positioning, we have a highly successful coach here. His name's Shannon Seabohm. He's a coaches in our professional women's league.
Mm-hmm.
He's won a gold medal at a World Junior Championship, and he's been a 4-time Coach of the Year here. He talks about your positioning shall be your help, right? So, where you position on the floor, your ability, that's your help. We don't have to talk about split line for one pass away, whatever. Your positioning is your help. If you're in the right spot, you're helping,
Uh-huh.
right? And I think adding screening helps that. Adding screening helps communication, and we haven't spoken much
Yeah, yeah.
about communication, but if your team's struggling to communicate defensively, make constant screening. Actually, they're going to have, even if you're switching. And of course, the other constraint is don't allow them to switch.
Yeah.
Even though you may be a switching coach, and as you said, it seems like I'm at this event here in Brisbane, and it seems every down screen is switched, right? And I get it, but add a constraint. Okay, you can't switch, but don't give them a solution.
Uh-huh.
Remember, you want them to be solution
Yeah.
seekers. You're not a
Let
solution
them found
provider.
out by themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we're going to do this shell drill. It's pass and screen away. The only rule of defending the screen is you cannot switch.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then they got to figure it out. So then the way they've got to figure it out is, one, communicate. Two, position themselves appropriately. So now they're driving the learning. Now they're finding the solution. It doesn't mean that you're not important, but again, I think one thing we've learned is if we provide all the information, the learning is not as efficient as we want it to be.
Mm-hmm. And you were talking about communication, and it would be the next thing that I was talking about, because all 4 pillars that we are talking about, all everything in defense has to do with communication. But on positioning, I do believe that an efficient communication can help a lot in possessions. In terms of, if I say that I'm last and I hear it saying last while I'm defending on ball, I'm way uh, comfortable to try to steal one ball or try to attack him the hips a little bit more. One of the biggest challenges as a coach right now, and I think ever, is putting your team being good on communication, being effective communicating. And I think it's a little bit hard now that kids are not, they're used to communicate from themselves, and they are used to communicate more through phones. So as a person that has been on both sides of the game, while you had like the Americans that they communicate like hell, and nowadays kids that doesn't communicate as much, don't communicate as much, what have been the things that have helped you as a coach to make them or put them then through communication a little bit more easier?
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to a young coach about this about 3 hours ago here at this tournament, and first thing is be realistic in your expectations,
Mm-hmm.
and make sure you provide clarity to the kids. And what I mean by those two things, they're not many coaches, so don't have them talking in coaching. Just get them to communicate what they're doing. We have a saying here: talk your task, TYT. So just get them to yell out what they're doing. Stance, right? Split, whatever it is just communicate what they're doing in one word, one syllable words.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ask them to say, "Hey, I'm doing this and I'm going to rotate. I'm Xing out." That's coach speak. That's not player speak, and they're never going to do that, right? And then just give them the language that makes sense to them, right? And then now you can measure. You can measure how effective they are. And now I can challenge you and say, "Hey, you're not communicating. You're not talking to your teammate. You're not." Because the reality is, often they go, "I don't know what to say."
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to help them with that. But I think sometimes as coaches, we have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
It's not about them being a mini coach out there and running a clinic on shell drill. They're just trying to communicate to their closest teammate so they can work together. And if you can achieve that, now that's something special. If everyone's talking to their closest defensive teammate, right, that's good coverage, and that's about as well as you're going to get. Unless you're a pro team, as you said, the Americans, you go to a college practice and it's just,
Yeah.
but it's also a lot of noise. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
lot of communication. There's a
Yeah.
difference between
Yeah,
noise and,
that's what I'm about to say. Yeah, yeah. I do think that noise helps on producing more on defense because it boosts the energy up. So if I'm communicate,
yeah.
if I'm doing noise, I'm anger, I'm ready to go. But communicating effectively is different. And I do feel like sometimes with some teams making noise at a very particular time in a game or in a practice, maybe it can be good because at least they are getting through some type of sound.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. But
So like you were saying, yeah. So yes, to say it.
I was just going to use the analogy, and I know, in Australia we call it soccer. You everywhere else in the world you call it football.
Football. Yeah.
But a young player might be coming through, and their ability to take a penalty, and so they just blast it. They just kick it as hard as they can, right? And in youth football, they score every time. Then they
Hmm.
go to like second division, and they score half the time because nearly everyone can kick it as hard as they can. They go to the Premier League or Serie A or whatever you want to call it, right? They score 10% of the time because everyone can blast it. Now you need skill, now you need variation, whatever. It's the
Hmm.
same with talk. Yeah, if you can create noise, great, but eventually it doesn't help you. It
Yeah.
might impact it might impact some confidence, it might impact energy, great, but when you're in a gold medal playoff, you need efficient communication. You don't need noise. So you've got to take them on that journey and get them to understand that it's about that. But I tell you, coach, if you've got solutions for that, you're going to make a lot of money
Yeah.
because it's a hard thing to do.
The most well secret, most well hidden secret in the world of basketball. Yeah.
Yes, this
No,
is
from
right.
and I've been looking a lot from communication drills, communication studies, and nothing seems to clarify me as what to you have to do A, B, C, and D. Like you say, it has to be try and error. Some things something goes really well, some things doesn't go well. I do think that it really depends on the kids also. Maybe at that day, some of the kids that had gotten an awful I don't know, an awful class or an awful school day, or a teacher just said something and they don't have the right mindset when they arrive to practice. So all this variability also can impact the our our communication, because some kids, when they feel that they are not being able to do the things, they close themselves out, they don't communicate, they don't talk. Like I have a lot of kids that when they are getting frustrated say, okay, what's happening, talk me through it. Oh, nothing. No, it can't be nothing, because if not, you are not frustrating. And then they start to open up. They start to talk, and then I feel like from there we can go from noise to communication. But we are talking about communication, and I do believe in positioning. One of the most important things is perception, space, time. Being perceptive of my space and my time while the ball flies, while the ball is in place, and it's the same analogy of being ready and be attentive. So I can be ready. I'm ready to go. Okay, I know that this is
Yeah.
happening, or I can be attentive. Okay, if this happened, I know that I have to boom, boom. I have to try to anticipate the moment or try to anticipate the move. Um, can we teach it? Or of course we can teach it. How can we teach it through small side games, through a more communication mindset, more transformation, like logical player centered, how you want to call it? How can we you, help players to be more perceptive on court while defending and while positioning themselves in a court?
Yeah, add an element of chaos,
Mm-hmm.
right? So as soon as players pick up the rhythm of the drill, you have to change the rhythm of the drill.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds funny, but rhythm cannot. Another word for rhythm is comfort.
Yeah.
I'm in a rhythm. Okay, I'm comfortable, right? As soon as there's comfort, while you want them to feel positive and confident, comfort's not a great thing, particularly defensively.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to make them uncomfortable at times. So add an element of change, add an element of chaos. Variability is obviously a big one in learning these days. Add different things, add an element of change, add an element of, when I say surprise, it won't be a surprise, but like
Mm-hmm.
they can't pick up when something's going to happen. So to your word, it's a great word, attentive, right? You can be ready, but if you're not attentive, you're going to be late,
Yeah.
right? The whole time. So that switch and change drill that I mentioned before, an element of chaos, adding random constraints. Don't
Mm-hmm.
have the same constraint every time because again they get come. Oh, this player's going to come in on this
Yeah.
bounce, or they're going to come in at this time, right? Use your assistant to make some randomness stuff. The other thing with shell drill and my great friend and mentor, Coach Rod Pop, who taught me everything I know about the game. As a young coach, I used to watch him. He'd stand in the middle of defensive drills, whether that's shell or whatever. He'd be there as a coach, and he's about 6'7", and he would stand in the middle, and he'd be able to see what they see, and every now and then he'd just screen someone randomly, or he might just grab a jersey randomly.
Mm-hmm.
So it just adds that element of chaos. And often with players, they'd get, oh, what's the
Mm-hmm.
coach doing in the middle of the drill?
Yeah. Yeah.
Initially, I thought this guy's nuts. What's he doing? But very quickly, I go, this guy's a genius. He was the variation. He was the one that impacted their attention span and whatever else. So, as a coach, one, you want to make sure it's safe, but just jump in the middle of it so you can see and you can get a sense for what they do, and then you can just add elements if that makes sense.
No, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I do had a coach that told me once that sometimes when he plays 4-on-4, even with shell drill, or when you are playing um, 4-on-3 plus one to get numbers and to attack dominoes and attack advantages, when someone was going full blast away, full blast to get an advantage, he would pull his jersey, he would get in front, he would try to smack the ball, and I said, but I understand that you are trying to get something out of it, but it, how realistic is that? And I say, Vasco, how many times a thing that you were not expecting happens during a game, and that
Mm,
changes the whole thing for me. And I said, oh, okay, I got it. And so sometimes out of nowhere, even I start to sprint in the middle of the drill. I stand still, or I yell in the middle of something that, or we do a lot of I try to do a lot of timeouts. So instead of we talking, they talk for themselves, and it's another thing about communication, and that I got it from Paul also. um, and in the middle of timeouts, I just yell. I, I
mm,
shout out of loud, and they just stop. And I say, I don't know why you're stopping. You remain, because if you are playing the big arena, shouts will happen. You have to be remain focused. So those things make sense to me because I'm a little bit nuts also. I'll try to get them off their balance, because like you say, comfort is not a good thing always. And as soon as I see them a little bit comfortable, I'll throw them off.
Yeah,
With
just do something. Just do something different.
yeah, yeah,
You're right. It's you got to make sure that you don't become a distraction, though,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's the balancing act. You know that
Mm-hmm.
because as you said, you asked the coach, "Oh, how realistic is this?" Yeah, you do have to make sure that what you're doing is adding value, is not becoming a distraction. Because if
Yeah,
you're a
yeah.
distraction, that's a negative. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's as I said, I learned a lot from Coach Pop, and that was probably the one thing that took with me. It's 30 years ago we started coaching together. Is just stand in the middle of the drill, impact it, see what they see, hear what they hear. And you're not trying to injure them, or you're not trying to impact them too much, but just the fact that there's this big person in the middle, it's just another thing that they've got to factor in.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing I'd say with positioning and shell is do it 4-on-5 with an unguarded post player. That's
Okay.
a Dick Bennett drill, a Bob Knight drill. So it's 4-on-4 positioning, and it's an unguarded post play. Now the only thing that the unguarded post player can't do is score, but you throw it in there, they can drive, they can hit cutters, they can come and ball screen and whatever. Initially, the only thing they can't do is score. Then you might say, okay, unguarded post play, you've got to get in two screening actions. So it might be an up screen into a middle pick and roll. Now we're playing 5-on-4.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just adding different elements. And I think the advantage of that is it changes vision too,
Mm-hmm.
because post play is usually below you. So now I've got to not only see my man, but where's the post player? Is he going
Uh-huh.
to come and screen me? Yeah, there's a lot of ways, and none of this is rocket science. It's just
Trial and
spending
error.
time and thought.
Yeah, like you said. So we were now we were talking about screening and the switching era of basketball, and but how can you teach after the teach it part, and you go to the drill it and then play it into a small side game? How can you teach the coverages? Because what I've been through, or what I've been feeling as a coach, is then when you're trying to put two coverages in a row or try to put some variability, so the offense is playing, and I say this player A, or the first rep we play, we're going to have a driver, and the second rep we have a shooter playing the screens. So you defend accordingly. What I felt is that by putting them those constraints, it restrains a lot of the creativity of the player that has the ball in hand, that then restrains the defensive part of the coverages. What do you use to use those constraints or use those elements of drill designing when you are talking about screening the defending screens, either off screens or on ball screens?
Element of advantage, right? So I agree with you. If you define this as a driver, this is a shooter. Players are smart. They're going to you, and that's the word. You're not constraining anymore. You're restraining.
Yeah, yeah.
So an element of advantage. And when I say element of advantage, what I mean is, say it's pick and roll. And I did a clinic last night in the Sunshine Coast here in Australia, and the pick and roll. So we flew the screener into the pick and roll from the elbow. Their defender just had to get 2 feet in the keyway before they went to screen, right? So it's an element of advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So the advantage was about 1.5 seconds, right? And then we didn't give them any other constraints. I didn't care if they went into a drop coverage, a switch coverage, a next coverage, whatever. I didn't talk about that. Here's the element of advantage: play, right, and think through it. What that does by adding an element of advantage, but not defining the next thing. It makes it more game-like, makes it more realistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing is add an element of contact, of realistic contact. Right. So say it's Spanish pick and roll, or in Australia we call it mixed pick and roll. Same thing. You know what I'm talking
Sí,
about?
sí, sí. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Add an element of contact. So we're going to be overtly physical on this screener play. Right. Don't define the second one. So I would add an element of advantage or an element of overt contact and let them play and be okay with the results. Because the more you define, the more unrealistic it'll be.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
Makes
makes
sense.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you want detail and you want clarity, but defining isn't clarity, right? It's making sure that everyone knows what they're going to do in one of three situations. That's clarity. Defining is everyone knows what we're going to do in one of one. Well, we know pick and roll play, for example, or flare screens. There's 4 or 5 different things that could happen.
Yeah,
So
and you were talking about creating advantage and disadvantage, and when we are late to a screen, or as a big or as a screener, we arrive late to defend it. We usually think that this has been a mistake, or I felt short and I didn't arrive, and now my coach is looking at me and I say, oh, okay, I that's my error. How can we, through adaptivity, through them understanding what to do in that situation, like I said, getting an advantage, how can we turn that mindset of okay, I made a mistake to okay, I adapt myself to the scenario that I'm into now? It's
yeah,
mainly by doing advantage and disadvantages, or is anything else we can do to help them achieve that adaptive ability, adaptive ability?
yeah. I look. Um, the obvious thing to do on a basketball court is usually the obvious thing to do. And what I mean by that is, so we've got an advantage situation where we with the defender, the screen defender's late. We put some constraint where they're going to be late,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so they recover. Do they recover to drop coverage? Do they switch? It's probably the two things that it's
Yeah,
going to happen, right?
yeah.
Now, what's the obvious thing to do, right? And there's no, we can't define what the obvious things to do because you've got the variability of speed and agility, size. How deep were they? How late were they? Time, space. Physiology, all sorts of things. Then ask them questions, right? Say, why did you make that decision, or why did you do that? Did you communicate that? Just ask them questions, and the most important thing, be okay with the answers.
Uh-huh.
Don't ask them questions and correct the answer.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
That's
That's
unfair.
interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
If I say to you, Vasco, why did you do this? And you tell me why, I say, no, you should do this.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's, I'm 54 years old. That's how I coach when I started coaching.
Mm-hmm.
One,
Yeah.
for the first 10 years, I didn't ask any questions. I just told everyone. Then when I did start asking questions, I just asked them, then answered them. That's unfair too. Now I'm old. I'm like, okay, I'm going to ask questions and then I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to be okay with answers. Because
Mm-hmm.
very rarely, if I say to you, why did you do this or why did you make that decision? It's not a right or wrong answer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm asking
It's
you
their
what you
perception.
saw.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it's
their perception.
perception.
Yeah.
So, um, and and just get them to do the obvious thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I say all the time, what do you think the obvious thing there? Oh, switch. Well, okay, just switch it,
Okay. Uh-huh.
right? Or if it's a 1-5 pick and roll, maybe you don't want to switch. What's the obvious thing to do there? Well, just stay drop, carry a big hand, slow recover. Okay, well, just do that. and all of a sudden you're taking them along for the journey rather than saying, no, 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 why didn't you do this? And carrying
Mm-hmm.
on and whatever else. So, but the big thing there is realistic advantage. Don't have the guy run off 5 meters, and that's not going to happen in a game. The advantages are going to be small.
Yeah.
So have realistic advantage or realistic contact.
Yeah.
Um,
And in terms of we're playing about advantages, disadvantages, different coverages. How can we add that variability, that type of chaos into a small side game? Like if you had to design now a drill about screening off screens or ball screens, and you add the element of advantage and disadvantage and chaos. How can you put those two together? Because I'm really big on chaos. I do love chaos. I do think it's hard to coach chaos because a lot of things happens, and at the beginning it can be frightening to young coaches. It was to me 4 or 5 years
yeah,
ago. Like everything happened at the same time. I was like, oh, what
yeah.
can I correct? How even I wasn't. That's why I started to record my practice to rewatch it. But that's a whole new thing. But how can you mix together chaos and advantage slash disadvantage and an element of content? All these things with chaos. How can we mix it up while screening?
Concept of time and opposites, right?
Okay.
So time and opposites. So, for example, if we want to talk about creating an advantage, um, we'll just stay with middle pick and roll because not
Mm-hmm.
that it's the only thing, but it's just a great example, right? So, guys, we're going to start here 4-on-4 or 3-on-3 plus one, whatever, out of floppy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to play floppy. And if we can get a score directly off floppy, we'll do that, right? Then I'm going to define a 6 second shot clock. So we're going to run floppy, get it in. If you can score, score. If not, pretty soon I'm gonna say now. And now there's a 6 second shot clock, and the rule is you must get to middle pick and roll.
Okay.
So now the offense has to think, how do we go from this shape alignment to middle pick and roll? So there's some offensive learning there. The defense has had to defend floppy, right? And then they've had to defend middle pick and roll, but they don't know when middle pick and roll is coming, which is, that's
Okay.
European basketball 101,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Some action, dominate the middle third of the floor. Some action, dominate the middle third of the floor. Right. That's what we've learned so much from your continent. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So just do that. Right. Or add an element of change. So we're going to go floppy. I get it in. We're not me as the coach. When I go ball, you're going to flip it to me. Right. You've got a down screen on your side of the floor. When I throw it into someone different, it's side pick and roll,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's the chaos. We don't know when it's going to happen. So get them to do time and opposite. So floppy's opposite to middle pick and roll. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
do that. And now you had a time constraint. Now they're playing off a 5 second shot clock. They're learning about time. It's decision making offensively. It's decision making communication defensively, and it's playing. It's not a drill. So
Yeah.
it, I don't have all the answers, but I think that they're just being a bit creative and adding
Yeah,
elements like
that's
that help.
that's what I was saying. Like this idea of time and opposites, I never thought about it. I think we do it a little bit unconsciously. Like we
Yeah,
try to throw chaos. Okay, we are playing this pin down. Then now you are attacking 1-on-1, so everyone has to shift on the other way. But now that I have the clarity, okay, this is time and opposites mentality or mindset. We can use it more effectively. Coach, getting down to our last pillar, transition defense, that has been, I think, the last 10 to 15 years when the game has sped up a lot. So the shot clock went down for 24, now for 14. Like everything is way faster. We want to do everything. We want to do 100 possessions a game. We want to play the first 8 seconds. We have to take the first three advantage. The first, so everything is sped up. So everything is a lot more faster. how can we help the players being more consciously aware of the transition D? Because like we were saying, the communication, the perception, time and space, all that stuff gets stuck on changing the roles of offense to defense. So if I get a shot off and I know that, I let's say my rule is below the free throw line goes to rebound, offensive rebound, above the free throw line goes to to protect the basket and getting to the retrieve line. But I do feel that sometimes they take a lot of time to shift from offense to defense, like we are saying before. How can we, through all the elements we were speaking, all the change and shift that you were speaking before, teach the transition defense more effectively?
I think the first thing, and I'll credit again our national team coach, Coach Gorgian. I think he's the best coach I've ever been around, but he's the best I've ever seen defensive transition into the way he
Okay,
teaches it, the way. So if
I'll
you
make I'll
ever
make
get
sure
a
I'll make sure I'll contact him to talk on the podcast about transition
yeah,
defense.
I'll
For-
dive him right in there. Yeah, but what he does a lot is he'll add an element of transition defense to every drill. So they'll be doing 5-on-0 scripting. It might be a shoot around.
Mhm,
So they'll be running floppy, for example, middle pick and roll horns, whatever you want to do. They're moving it, getting that rehearsal. Shot goes up, and then there's an assistant coach on the baseline, and they're rolling a second ball slowly. You would have seen it, I'm sure. They're rolling a second ball slowly down the court, or they're dribbling a ball slowly down the court.
mhm,
And after the offensive rehearsal, now everyone's got to get to their spots. Ball, plugger, who's got the basket, kick ahead lanes, whatever, however you define it. And it just becomes the continuation of every drill, right?
mhm.
So that's the
Yeah.
rehearsal side of it. It takes 6 seconds, per time, but again, it's just hiding the broccoli in the sauce. They're just constantly doing it, and it's also a reminder that it's important that if you don't do this, you aren't going to play.
Mhm,
Then of course, advantage disadvantage drills again are important. D-trans, we've all done them, 3-on-2 continuous, all those sort of things, and they're not bad drills. It's really important. And then always, if you're going 5-on-5 in the half court, so you're trying to work your, don't go 5-on-5 in the half court. What I mean by that is, okay, so we're going to work on our floppy or whatever it may be. Shot goes up. Now we got defensive transition, and we finish the other end. Now we might not play the other end,
mhm,
but we finish, and then we freeze it and go, okay, how? And we do a review, a super hot review. Okay, have we got the ball address? Yep, pretty good. Have we got a plugger? So have we got someone helping on the ball? Yep. Is the basket covered? Is the most obvious kick ahead done? And we do a quick snapshot. It's almost like a screenshot. Boom. Yep, good. Right, now back.
So you're
So
saying, sorry, coach. So you're saying after we play whatever set we want to, we do the first part of the defensive transition, and we stop and say, okay, point A good, point B good, point C maybe not so good. Okay, let's
yeah,
fix it. That okay, that's a nice idea. I never
and
thought
then
about that. Yeah,
and don't fix it there. Just start again
Yeah,
there and
yeah,
go
yeah, yeah. Fix it
whatever else.
after. Yeah. Okay, we have to
And
get better
so
than that next one. Yeah.
yeah, what it does is it adds 4 to 6 seconds to every drill you do,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, every repetition in every drill that you do, and so now it's almost sneaky. You're just getting more and more repetitions of it.
Uh-huh.
One, you're getting to understand, but also you're teaching them that rehearsal element to just add a component of defensive conversion
Mm-hmm.
every time, because you need to train their brains to go to a what's next mentality.
Yeah,
Now most players will have a what's next mentality when it's offense to offense. So I pass the ball, now I know I've got a screen, or I pass the ball, I know I've got a cut. Right, I receive the ball, now I've got to make a move. So that on offense they'll always have a what's next mentality. Right.
Mm-hmm.
When it's from transitioning from offense to defense is when they don't necessarily all have a what's next mentality. So it's just exposing them to that decision more often, and that's what it is.
Yeah. Do you think
I'm
that?
deciding to
Yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
Now that you were talking about this next, what's next? Can we use the same example in terms of ending the offense and starting the defense? Can we use it the other way around? So you are defending 5-on-5 half court and then just play until a half court the first 3 seconds, so they can get the next play mentality of getting the ball. Boom. Even if it is a after a made basket. I was just
Yeah,
thinking about that. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
yeah, for sure. Because if with young teams, I was helping coach my son. I have a 12-year-old son in a tournament on the weekend, and they run down the middle of the floor. All five players, they get a steal or a rebound, and they all run down the five. That's what young players do.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, to flip it, you just do that conversion drill going the other way. So we're playing D now. Once the ball crosses halfway, freeze. How's our width? Pretty good. Is our first big down the floor on the rim? Yeah, they're heading that way. You could be wider. You could be wider. Okay, let's go back to shell now. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's adding the what next to as many drills as you can, and that's where the really great coaches and Coach Gorgian is the master at it.
Uh-huh.
He'll add that what next just to continually remind players that's the game. It's a very dynamic, fast changing, fast moving game. So
Yeah, and
um,
when we talk about transition to defense on a turnover or on a missed shot, for you it changes the way as you drill it, or you can mix it up together, saying, okay, we're playing till I say stop or till I say switch, and it's a turnover, or we're playing through a missed shot. Can we mix the whole thing together? It's better to separate it and work it by themselves and then try to mix it at the end. What's your experience tells you?
yeah, I think same methodology: teach it, drill it, play it.
Okay.
I think too often we drill defensive transition or we teach it in a very controlled setting when we know it's the most chaotic and random setting, yet we make it nice and neat. So
Mm-hmm.
our practice looks good, our drill looks good. So
Yeah.
it doesn't make any sense. And I've done this plenty of times, so I'm not being critical of anyone. But they need to know the mechanics of it. I think too often this is where I don't think you need to be in a hurry to get to small-sided games
Mm-hmm.
or live play. They need to know the consistent mechanics and geography of what they need to, who's going where, and what's your job when you get there,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And then as you add some randomness, yeah, it can be switch and change. You can play two-ball basketball, and what I mean by that is, um, you know, black jerseys have it, and they're playing out of shakes or drags or whatever they're playing out of. On the change, they have to throw that team has to throw the ball
To a
to
coach.
one coach,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
other coach is entering the ball, and now, right, but they don't know when it's happening, right? I think that's a great little defensive thing because it's a little bit contrived and it's not necessarily game like because of course you don't play basketball with two games but two balls, but it
Yeah,
does
it,
give
it
you
comes
that
again, it comes back
variability.
to what I was saying before about perception of time and space. So my perception was on the ball A, and now I have to shift all my attention and my focus to another ball, and it gets us through that rhythm a little bit more fast. And I do like to do either two balls or at the go, or when we get the ball we have to pass to a coach that is in the middle, and it can pass to whoever, and that starts. Okay, so if you pass to the first trailer, the transition is totally different than if you pass to a winger while running.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I do make those type of stuff, and I do really like, because it's very challenging for young players to understand all the scenarios. But if you can, in a practice with 20 minutes of defensive transition, we can put them through, I know, 7, 8, 9 different scenarios. they will most likely be more prepared to be ready to whatever scenario comes to the game. So, coach, just before we end up, because if not, I would be here until tomorrow morning in Australia, while talking with you about this type of stuff. At the end of every episode, we do a little bit of a little game called Corner Free. So the idea is I'll throw you three questions, and I want you to respond that with the first idea that comes to mind. It can be a good idea, a bad idea, and if you see there is something that you would like to go further into, we can go further into that subject. It's okay.
Okay, let's do
So
it.
the first question is, if you can give yourself, your 25-year self, when you or whenever you start coaching, an advice, you can just give them one phrase or one advice, what would it be?
Be more patient.
Mm-hmm.
I think young coaches are in a hurry, and we want to help the players so much that we get in our own way. And I know I was like that. I overcoached. Um, we have a saying here: most players think coaches coach too much.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I know I was like that at 25.
Okay.
I wanted to teach every element of the game, every possession. So if I was to go back, I'd say just be more patient.
When you say more patient, is with yourself or within practicing game, like letting things flow a little bit more?
Now, yeah, with the players and with the flow of practice,
Okay, okay. Yeah, that's from I think that's the most difficult thing to do by yourself. If you don't have a mentor or someone that tells you, hey, you're talking too much. I do think that getting that rear view of, okay, I'm talking too much is very difficult because we are so into that, and now we want to help them that much, so much that we overcoach it a lot of times. Yeah,
yeah.
I feel that a lot. Okay, great. Second question: if you had the chance to sit down at a table, have dinner with two people, two different people, from wherever sport is, wherever profession, wherever space and time on the world, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Dean Smith would be the first one,
Okay.
the great coach of the University of North Carolina, and one, obviously, huge respect for what he accomplished as a basketball coach, but more so his ability to impact those around him, leader, and use basketball as a vehicle for impacting, cultural change,
Mm-hmm.
societal change, whatever. I just think just such an impressive, leader of men. And the other one would be Barack Obama for the same reasons. Just someone who just drove so much change across all elements of society, and their ability to do it through their personality and their charisma, both Coach Smith and President Obama. So they would be probably the two people. But I think it'd be an interesting dinner.
Yeah, I think so. And the third and last one, did you ever had or do you have like a book, a quote, a movie that really changed your way about coaching or even life? So after you saw it, read it, or listened to it, you said, "Oh, this changes everything."
Yeah, I'm an avid reader. Probably
Mm-hmm.
one that had a really significant influence is Above the Line by Urban Meyer and Tim Kite. Urban Meyer, for those that don't know, a highly successful collegiate gridiron coach and coach for a time in the NFL. Tim Kite is a performance psychologist and someone who understands people. So that book just gave me great clarity on how to lead a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
One from a coaching setting, but also from an organizational setting. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a big one for me. Above the Line, Urban Meyer.
Okay, thanks, Coach. Just to close it, if do you have anything to add on what you were saying, what you were talking, like, because I ask coaches this a lot of times because this podcast before was in Portuguese, so I had a lot of I don't know. I don't like to use the fan base word, but I do have a lot of people from Portugal listening, even if it's English, and a lot of them are young coaches that are starting, coaches from my age that are starting now. Um, if you could give a message to every young coach in the world right now that is going through, it went through COVID, after COVID, a lot of information, they can see like have 100 different articles from your stuff, through clinics, through YouTube, through news, through images, everything. If you had a message, what would it be?
Coach from your personality. You know, as you said, there's so much information available now, and it's great, but it can confuse you. So just
Yeah.
make sure that anything you do is coming from your value system and your personality. Don't try and be Coach Pesic or Obradovic, or, you know, don't try and be Victor Lapena. You know, be you first. Make sure everything that you learn is applicable for your personality, and
Hmm.
you'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be a coach because of the learning opportunities. Here we are, we've never met. I'm in a hotel room in Brisbane, you're in an apartment in Europe, and we're sharing.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But we've got to make sure that it fits our personality first, and that's always got to be the foundation. So that would be the big thing for me.
Great, coach. I think that's the perfect way to finish it off this conversation. So, coach, and again, really a big thank you from my heart, because it was one of the best conversations that I had with coaches so far in the podcast and in my life. So, really big thanks on that. And for everyone who's listening and seeing, you can find Coach Lonergan on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, on Google. You just put Peter Lonergan, and you have a lot of resources to go through from all over his career. So, Coach, big thanks. And continue to have a good national championship, right? That you are going under 18 championship, national
That's
championship.
right.
Yeah, good work, and I hope to talk to you again, and we can connect a lot more times, because I really love the experience.
Thanks, Vasco. Appreciate it.